Good evening and welcome to this last Wednesday night Lenten service, April 1st, 2020. Tonight I'm going to base my message on the 23rd Psalm. It reads, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul and leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not be afraid, because he is with me. His rod and staff give me courage. He will prepare a table for me in the presence of those who have troubled me. He will anoint my head with oil. My cup shall be filled to overflowing. Surely God's goodness and mercy has been with me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." We live in a day and an age where people will believe almost anything. But no one can predict how life is going to turn out. No one knows the uncertainties in life we will all face. At funerals, I'm often asked to read the 23rd Psalm because it offers such a powerful message of hope in the face of death. But it also is a psalm that offers us hope in the face of the uncertainties in life that we face. David was called by God when he was just a shepherd boy. He became a mighty, powerful warrior king. He led the people of Judah and Israel to overcome their enemies. He experienced heartache and shame because of sins, a broken family, and the death of two of his sons. Yet, as David looked back over his life, he could see that God's hand had been blessing him, protecting him, guiding him along the way. The theme that describes David's life is that he had an unfailing trust in God's goodness and mercy. And when David searched for an ample way to describe the nature of God, he thought back to his days as a shepherd, and he described God as being his shepherd, the one who watches over him, the one who leads him in paths of righteousness. We all experience times of heartache and pain, but we also experience times of God's blessings, blessings that flow abundantly in our lives. We are healthy, we're happy, our loved ones are safe, we have food on our tables, our prayers are answered, though maybe not always in the way we want them to be answered or as quickly as we'd like them to be. But we can sense that God's presence is very near, and God has promised to restore us, to uplift us, to keep us mindful of his plan that we are destined for eternity with him in heaven. David says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not be afraid, because he is with me." He says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of those who trouble me, and you anoint my head with oil. My cup flows to overflowing." If you want to look for the valley of the shadow of death, don't bother, because you'll never find it on a map. We are surrounded by it. We are always living in the shadow of death. Yet God is still present, always working in the presence of evil. God is still finding a way to redeem even the most challenging times, like what we are experiencing these days as we face the spreading deadly coronavirus. Rachel Naomi Raymond was a psychiatrist, and she treated people with cancer. She wrote about a time when a young fellow came to her, a college student, and he had cancer in his leg. Up until that time, he had been a star athlete in school, in high school and college. He had an exciting life ahead of him, a wonderful future. But 2 weeks before the diagnosis was made, the doctors removed his right leg above the knee. His life spiraled out of control. His life fell apart. He became depressed and self-destructive. At their first meeting, Dr. Raymond asked him to draw a picture of his body. So he drew a crude picture of a flower vase with a large dark crack going through the center of it. The drawing was a powerful statement of how the death of his hopes and dreams and his future had affected him. And unbeknown to him, Dr. Raymond kept that picture. Gradually over time, the young man's anger lessened. He began to heal. And at his last visit, the doctor gave him this picture he drew at their first visit. And he asked him if he remembered drawing this. He looked at it and he said, "Oh yes, I do remember it. There was a dark time in my life. But the picture isn't finished." So he asked Dr. Raymond for a yellow highlighter pen. And then he drew thick yellow lines that were radiating out from the crack to the very edges of the page of paper. And when he had finished, he had a big smile on his face, and he pointed to that crack, and he said, "This is where the light comes through." When you have an awful tragedy strike, we may think to ourselves, "This is it. I'm finished. I'm done." But notice what King David says. "Even though I walk through the valley of death, I will not be afraid. I will fear no evil, for you are with me." And we need to remember that in our times of suffering. Our suffering is only temporarily. There will always be a path through. There will always be a way out. David discovered that the antidote to his anxiety was the realization that God had always been with him in his life. To know that you are never alone. To know that God's presence and strength and comfort is always available to you. To know that God has created you for eternity. This is the antidote to our anxiety. This knowledge allows us to look beyond what is temporary and remember that in heaven, our true destination lies. As David says in verse 6, "Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever." That is the precious promise of our faith, that God's love for us is unfailing. And one day we will live with him, free of all the burdens that we experience in this life. George Matheson, he was a young seminary student, and when he was a student, he lost his sight, became blind. And you can imagine how terrible that was for him. When his fiancée learned of this, she broke off their engagement, and he struggled. He struggled to finish his seminary education with being blind. But upon his graduation, he was assigned to a small rural congregation. And even though he could have grown bitter and angry at God, he wrote one of the most beautiful hymns that we have in our green hymnal. And it's called, "O Love That Will Not Let Me Go." The third verse I find very meaningful. It goes like this: "O joy that seekest me through pain, I cannot close my heart to thee. I trace the rainbow through the rain and feel the promise is not in vain, that morn shall tearless be." While under arrest in Rome, the Apostle Paul wrote to the Christians at Philippi, and he says, "I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I face. I know what it is to need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. whether I'm well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. I don't know what kind of valley you may be going through, but I can tell you this. The Lord is with you. You are not alone. By his grace, you will make it through. The Lord is your shepherd. Do not be afraid. Amen. There's something I hope you will always remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. But most important of all, remember that Jesus will always be with you. I've asked my wife to play for us that hymn, O Love That Will Not Let Me Go. The Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine upon you and give to you at his peace. Stay at home and stay well. Amen.